Hello and welcome to Rise of Humanity Training for the Spiritual Warrior. I'm your host, Chris Karamaya, and I'm here with my guest today, Mr. Sabbir Muslim, to talk about his work in using spiritual practices to becoming your best self and giving your gifts to the world. Now, Sabbir is a coach and author of the book Bulletproof Peace, 30 Spiritual Secrets of Peace and Happiness, which contains some very powerful tools and knowledge that Sabbir has accumulated throughout his spiritual journey and some great guidance on how to use these tools to improve your life today. So, Sabbir, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you very much for having me on. I'm really looking forward to this. So thank you.
Great. Glad to have you here. So I read through your book and it was a great experience. I got really good vibration just from reading it, and then through using the tools and action steps part of the book as well. So that was great. Thank you for that. So if you could begin with you just sharing your story from the beginning. I mean, you talk in the book about your issues with food and the desire to please your parents with your career from quite an early age. So if you could just start from there, really.
Yes, absolutely. So right from an early age, I felt kind of disconnected, like something was wrong with me. And food seemed to be a very, very comforting means of just having some comfort or relief from my inner feelings, and it became an addiction. So I was compulsively overeating, had to go to fat clinics. I couldn't stop. And also from a very early age, my father especially, and my mother as well, wanted me to become a medical doctor. So there was food, and then there was the great desire to get the approval of my parents. And so I tried to apply myself academically, sometimes very successfully, and sometimes I'd be overeating and be kind of numbed out and unable to study or focus before exams. So it was a bit hit and miss. And this kind of attitude of trying to achieve in the world in some form carried on with me, because I thought if I could finally be a doctor, if I could finally be this thing called successful in the world, then I would arrive and I would feel okay, and I would have self-esteem, and everything would be fine and everyone would love me. And this pattern carried on, and as I was growing up, the food addiction got worse. I started to have health problems. I started to get anemia. My mother said I had bad breath. My hair was falling out in my mid-teens, literally going bald. And I was very stressed out, trying to achieve, and then also trying to control my weight with diets. And later on, I did get one interview in medical school, but failed that. But got in for a degree in biochemistry, and again, I had this kind of workaholic combined with the food addiction kind of addictive nature. That if I could be successful with food or successful with being able to stop my food addiction, somehow I would arrive at some form of success or feeling okay. And then one of my friends at university said to me, actually, it's not, there's more glamour and prestige, and you'll be more successful if you got a job in the stock market. So all of these things related to achievement in the world sort of caught me, and it was like, yes, if I can finally get a job in the stock market, and on that day I'll finally have arrived, and everything will be okay, and life will be fine. And so eventually I started. It's a long story, but it took a lot of effort and a lot of time and a lot of rejection. I finally got my break in the stock market, and again, this thing of like really not feeling good enough and needing to achieve to get some form of self. I was always chasing these things where if I could achieve something, and I got the job in the stock market and still I didn't feel good enough. But my head said, well, if you become successful in the stock market, then you'll feel good enough. So I really went into the workaholism from early morning to late night, waking up at something like 5 a.m. in the morning. Some days I'd finish work at about 10 p.m. at night and then head off home. So real workaholism, and got pay rises. But as I was working, it was like I was losing myself more and more, striving for something that wasn't satisfying me. I was getting bronchitis and I was still going to work coughing. I remember one instance I was in the toilets and I was just coughing up blood into the toilets because I was just very ill. I shouldn't be at work, but I couldn't stop myself because of this need to achieve. It was becoming addictive in nature, like I had to do it. And someone was referring like, yeah, what are you doing in the toilets? It sounds like you're coughing up your guts. And then the director of the company said, the company was doing well. He sent me off to New York on a business trip. And on the trip back, flight back to London, suddenly my feet started swelling up. And I actually had to take my shoes off. They were puffed up enormously. And when I got home, my mother was horrified looking at my puffed up feet. I had a blood test done and I was admitted straight away to the Royal Free Hospital. And the doctors took a blood test and they saw that I had kidney failure. And I was 30 years old and I'd lost about 70% of my kidney function. I'm guessing I'd lost about 70% of my kidney function in about 24 hours. So I was literally racing towards death at a rapid rate. And the doctors said they didn't know what was causing the rapid decline. And basically they didn't know what to do to halt the kidney failure. And they were taking about 10 tubes of blood at a time to send off to the various departments to try and figure out what was going wrong. And I was facing death in the hospital bed at the age of 30. And it was like there was nothing I could do to save myself in that situation. And these thoughts of I'm probably going to die soon came over me. And then it was like I surrendered. It was like there was nothing more I could do. I was facing death. And I had, what I can only say is, to explain it, as a timeless, heavenly, spiritual experience came over me, this beautiful heavenly experience. And in that experience, I actually heard a voice say, find a spiritual solution. And I was in this heavenly bliss, and then it suddenly ended, and I was restored back to my normal consciousness. But it was such a profound experience, and I had the hope that a spiritual solution would be the thing that I needed from a higher source, and that everything I had tried to feel good enough or to feel okay in the world or to be who I was meant to be, it was not in the things I had chased, but I had to find the solution spiritually.
So it sounded like you were definitely sort of very attached to external things up to that point in order to feel fulfilled.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely, Chris. Absolutely. This was the thing. I thought, maybe I would think food could be the solution. Then I would think a diet could be the solution. Then I thought if I could be a doctor, that would be the solution. Then I thought if I could get a job in the stock market. But I would always get these things or achieve many of these things, and then it wouldn't be enough, and I would still feel empty. So that's right. Yes?
So you mentioned, and I read this from your book, at that point that you had that amazing experience in hospital. One thing you said that it wasn't a spiritual solution itself. It was an instruction to go and find a spiritual solution. So it was obviously just opened up a completely new path for you at that point.
That's correct. Absolutely. It was like it was an instruction that the solution would be spiritual.
So how did you sort of begin on this path then? Obviously it opened up a whole new sort of, well, hopefully for you is a new glimmer of hope, but also a lot of questions it raised in your mind, I suppose.
You're absolutely right, Chris. The spiritual experience end, and I wasn't a spiritual person at all. And I often joke it didn't say how or where or what to do. Yeah. So I sort of, after the spiritual experience, I racked my brain, and I had glanced over a book by Deepak Chopra that mentioned TM meditation, and I did go. As soon as they released me from the hospital, I enrolled on a TM meditation course, and that was one of the first things. I had high hopes. Maybe this was supposed to be it, this meditation, and it was very helpful. But I knew it wasn't going to be the thing. And after a while, and it was a long journey of trying many different things spiritually. I was in the early days, I was in a spiritual exploration phase, and I would go to these different types of spiritual groups or spiritual activities, and I would try them out for a while, and would then know after a period. I tried a Buddhist group, I tried a church, I tried becoming a spiritual healer, then a Reiki healer, but then these didn't work either. And I was going through visiting Indian gurus in London, various things, and I would explore these things, but after a while I would know it wasn't the right thing that I needed to be on. And then eventually, after about, I think, approximately 2 years of exploration in different places, in one of these spiritual groups, I had a mentor. His name was Hans, and he gave me a DVD, and he said, "Sabbir, take this home and watch this DVD." So I took it home, and I put the DVD in the DVD player, and this man with a grey beard started to speak, and immediately I had what I now, in hindsight, realize was what I'd call a Kundalini experience, or this tingling sensation and this bliss that was sort of rising up me. And it was the most beautiful experience. And it was then that I knew, it was like the universe was guiding me. Yes, this is a teacher whose path you should follow. And his name was Dr. David Hawkins. He died a few years ago, but I had it's explained in my book. I did get a chance to meet him, and it was the pathway that I needed to recover from my addictive nature, and also I had now kidney failure. I was eventually on a machine for 8 hours a day. I had developed asthma and gout, these painful attacks in my feet when they would swell up extremely painfully, and I have to use walking sticks. And I had all these health conditions and this addictive nature. But he said, for the addictions, just find a relevant 12-step group, and that would take care of that. And for the all the illnesses I had, he encouraged doing A Course in Miracles, which is freely available on the internet. The lessons can be found, everything's on there, or can be downloaded as an app. And that he said he'd had 20 illnesses, 20 physical illnesses, and through many of them life-threatening, and he had applied these spiritual lessons to his illness, and all 20 left him. because I had that spiritual experience with the DVD, I somehow knew that this was it. I needed to do the Course in Miracles and do those lessons every day. And especially, there's a lesson 14 from A Course in Miracles, which says in the text of lesson 14, God did not create cancer, so it is not real. And he also, I mean, Dr. Hawkins said he also had gout, and that left him, and many other illnesses left him, ulcers left him, and severe infections left him. And through applying all of the lessons and also releasing the beliefs that are held in mind that underpin these illnesses, for example, God did not create kidney failure, so it is not real. God did not create asthma, it is not real. Plus doing the general spiritual work of just clearing away all one's negative beliefs and things like, if I'm only successful, I can be happy. All these beliefs, and or happiness comes from something outside of me, and all of these ideas, or until this happens, I cannot be happy. So through clearing away all of this, and also entrenched beliefs, which almost they're a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you believe something negative, it can happen. So to clear all of that, and because he was living testimony of just clearing away, and had become such a bright light in the world, and was now helping others and sharing a spiritual message of what's possible, not only in clearing away things and releasing physical illnesses that create enormous suffering, but also ideas that until this can be achieved or that happens, you cannot be happy. And then, awakening to one's higher spiritual potential, to be of love and service, and to help others break free of, I call them the collective belief systems that, unless you're successful, you can be happy, or unless you're thin, or unless you're attractive, or unless you're young, you can be happy. Various ideas that through culture and through family one gets programmed with, which are conditions. And when all of this is cleared, then one can be who one is meant to be in this world, to be connected to one's authentic self, and to be of pure love, and to help, and to be guided in one's gifts in the highest possible way. So I knew he was coming from that place of pure love, and shattering all the ideas that created suffering, and the lessons would also, if I applied them. And also, part of why I'm so enthusiastic in sharing the spiritual tools that have helped me to become free is that I was discharged from the asthma clinic. The gout medication that I was taking, the gout attacks stopped for so long that they stopped giving me the medication for that. My health. Also, obviously, when I was in this mire of low self-esteem and thinking I needed to achieve something before I could ever feel okay in the world, that dropped away, because it was endless low self-esteem, not feeling good enough, always chasing something that never satisfied. So it was a very negative and dark place.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something that so many people in the world can relate to. I mean, it's just, until you find some deep meaning within yourself, you're always going to be stuck in that trap of just chasing something external. The job, the money, the success, which definitely sounds like something that you went through, but also worked through as well, rather than just became sort of victim to it. But could you just share, obviously, that point that you came across David Hawkins' teachings, that was a big change for you. But could you just share kind of after you got that spiritual experience, your mindset until you found David Hawkins' teachings? I mean, because you went through loads of different groups. Were you inspired? Were you just hopeful, or were you experiencing a lot of frustration in that journey at that time?
I was actually experiencing a lot of frustration until I was given the DVD, because every new group that I went to, I thought that would be it. And I would have this enthusiasm for a while. Like for example, with TM meditation, I thought it's spiritual. It's one of the things I heard. And they gave you this mantra to learn. I thought, okay, I'm doing it for a while, and it was helpful. But then after a while, it still wasn't really the thing that was taking me out. I was still, it would give me relief, but I knew it wasn't what I was really looking for. And I went to a Buddhist group, and I thought, but then again, my life hadn't transformed. So I would go in with high hopes, just like I had gone in my days of chasing something, to finally feel okay. And it was very, very similar. So I was quite frustrated. With every place I went, I was hopeful for a while and then frustrated in the end.
Did you feel that you learned something new each time, or was it kind of just really nothing occurring each time?
No, there was definitely amazing things happening in the various things. Absolutely things that were mind-altering, and the journey was very valuable. The first spiritual healer that I ever met, I had no spiritual experience, and this lady just put her hands and just put them down without touching the body. She just moved her hands around my body without touching it. And for the very first time, I realized these energies in the body, and it was like, as I saw it, it just altered my whole experience, that someone can just hold their hands without touching the body, and I could feel this kind of moving energy within me. And it just suddenly, my whole paradigm of what the world, I'd studied biochemistry, I'd been in the stock market, and I thought everything was scientific. There was no kind of spiritual dimension to the world. And so it was, I mean, there were mind-blowing experiences, but then I would go to the healing, and still I knew it wasn't the right answer for me. I remember visiting a Reiki teacher, and I had the same effect. And I had all the attunements up to a master attunement with this Reiki teacher. But it was wonderful. But at the end, I wasn't healed. And what was required was, later on I found through all of these, and I learned a lot with all of these different places. Some I didn't learn anything, but some I learned, like with the healing. I also learned a lot. I trained to be a hypnotherapist, and still that wasn't the thing. I thought maybe that would be a thing that I could use on myself, but I knew that wasn't it in the end. But there was so much that was learned, but there was a missing piece that I wasn't finding. I thought each one would be enough for me to arrive and to feel okay. And also, I was in terrific suffering with all of my physical illnesses. So when I was when Dr. Hawkins showed that he had had all enormous suffering in his life, and had to the point of death, similar to myself, and had a spiritual awakening, and was led to the Course in Miracles and various teachers, that everything was lifted, and he was, if you like, he was clear now to be his authentic self, and to not be afflicted by negative thoughts, as you were saying, with externals. But as you clear all of that, and you're able to alleviate the suffering of the physical side of things, then one can be like clearer in being of love and service, and being guided to share one's own unique gifts with the world from a higher place once you're free of these limiting ideas.
Hmm. Could you I read this from your book. You had quite a profound spiritual experience with a teacher that you met called Mooji. Mooji is a spiritual teacher from Jamaica, and could you just talk about your what you learned from Mooji and the experience that you had in meeting him in private?
Yes, thank you. No, thank you very much for asking that, Chris. And he's in my book, and a major part of he's my other teacher. But it's corroborated. Hawkins talked about various paths which were very, very good for clearing the ego. And Mooji, is his lineage is the teachings originated from Ramana Maharishi, who was an Indian saint who was classified as an enlightened sage, and it's really going into the level of really clearing all of one's ego mind or past identity to connect to the absolute light that is within when all identification with the prior identity is released. So I was going going to his groups and feeling essentially when going to his groups, I would go in with a quite chattery mind, and when he would speak in the groups, at the end I'd be in these profound states of bliss and happiness, and my mind was absolutely quiet and still, and everything was just so peaceful and happy. And then one day he said at the end of the group, he said, if anyone wants to come and visit me for a one-to-one session, just let me know at the end, and we'll book we'll book a time for us to meet one-to-one. So something intuitively in me said, you should do that. And but there was also fear in letting go of my habitual thinking patterns, and letting go of cherished ideas of who I thought I was and what I was, and habitual ways of thinking. So it was organized, and on the day I had to meet him, I woke up and I had this horrible gout attack, and one of my legs was puffed up, swollen, and it was agonizing to put pressure on. And I was having this thought, oh, well, I should just call him up and cancel it. But there was something deep and new that I shouldn't. So it was really gout is when suddenly the feet very, very quickly swell up and the skin stretches very, very rapidly and causes really acute pain because of the huge swelling and inflammation in the toe and the feet. So I decided to go, but I was limping, and every footstep was agony. And it was like, what I realize now was, it was like there was it was like something in me didn't want to meet him, to be free, and so I was psychosomatically having a lot of mental resistance, and also physically manifesting a lot of things, so that it was like something didn't want total freedom in my thinking, and and it was also psychosomatically manifesting things in my body not to go. But I'd had these, the spiritual experience in the hospital bed and the spiritual experience with the DVD, and so I knew that freedom, these to really be my highest self, it was necessary to let go of all blocks so that I could be that, anything that limited me with pain or negativity. So I went there, and I told him when I met him, it was very, very difficult to come along to the session. And then he said it was fine, and he took me he had a little tiny room, and almost like a tiny little office, and we both sat in the room. And I had been practicing his technique, which is called self-inquiry, which is essentially asking what is observing one's sense of self. So if there are thoughts, is there a detached observer observing those thoughts? Or if there's a say a pain in the foot, is there a witnesser or an observation of that foot? So, and by this process, seeing is the true point of self the observation of the thought, or the observation of the pain, or is one the pain, or is one the thoughts? And to clarify this through this process. And he asked me, where have you got to with this self-inquiry? And I said, well, I keep trying it, and I'm watching your DVDs, but the best I get is there seems to be some kind of flat observer looking at the thoughts, and that's as far as I've got. So he said, okay, so he said there's this flat observer which is behind your head looking at these thoughts, but is there something behind observing this observer? And as I did that, suddenly it was like the world disappeared in infinite light, and there was just this infinite presence of love, light, and power, and it was it was the most beautiful experience ever, and by far. And then at a certain point, it seemed like a thought tried to emerge in this, and there was some identification with it. And then immediately, it seemed like the room came back. But now, and Mooji was sitting there, but now it was like absolute bliss, and tears were streaming down my face, because it was suddenly like the world was beautiful. And everything was just seen in stunning clarity and beauty, or witnessed in beauty is probably more accurate. And Mooji could see the shift, and said that I could now leave, because I was in this basically state of bliss, and everything seemed to be exquisitely beautiful that was witnessed. And yes, you wanted to say something? Or shall I carry on?
I was just going to say, it sounds like a very profound experience, and it must have been an amazing thing for you to experience. Definitely.
Yes, it showed in hindsight, and later on, of course, it becomes a bit more obvious. Well, that the habitual thinking and the negative beliefs block one off from one's authentic potential enormously. And so it was like there was this just state of presence and beingness, and walking down. I was going to go to the underground of the tube, or to get the transport, and it was like the trees were beautiful. Everything was seen to be absolutely exquisitely beautiful and perfect, and it was this sort of almost like a timeless presence. And then on the tube, I was at the time doing some part-time work in the evening, and suddenly I was sitting on the tube, and it was a profound experience. It was like witnessing the people in the tube. There were just tears coming down my eyes, because they all looked so absolutely beautiful, like exquisite pieces of art, everyone on the tube. But then these thoughts started to come in more heavily into my mind of, oh, you've got to get to work now. And I started thinking more negatively, because it was basically for charities, but trying on the phone, telling people about the charities, hoping they would give money to these charities. So and see, handling any objections they had or concerns about giving money to certain charities. And so these negative thoughts started to come in. And when I got into the environment, the thoughts came in more strongly. I need to perform. I need to show that I'm doing a good job, that I am successful at this. So these thoughts really started to come in heavily. And by the end of the shift, that exquisite state had vanished. And in hindsight, I could see now, by holding on to these negative thoughts, I had come down from these high spiritual states of presence and beauty to this kind of negative self-talk.
It sounds like you were at that point definitely trying to kind of channel two separate energies at the same time, this much higher one, and then obviously you had the still hanging on to the lower energies, and obviously eventually you dropped back down to the lower one.
Exactly. Yes, it was like I was in the high level, the high energies, and then it was like the low energy thoughts were coming in, and I would say now, in hindsight, I gave them the power to be real, and to purchase them, and the more I purchased them, the more I went to the lower level of my being, to the old habitual. I need to perform. I need to be successful. I need everyone to know that I'm good at this.
Yeah. So have you? I mean, looking back from that point to like when you were working as a stockbroker, and obviously you were very stressed, and you had this illness and the kidney failure, and all the struggles you had with food when you were younger and trying to get into medicine. Looking back, do you feel like maybe there's kind of a spiritual misalignment or imbalance, like from the very beginning, and that all those problems in a way were pushing you forward to that point where you finally had that spiritual experience in hospital, and then everything changed for you? And do you kind of think that maybe looking back, everything was always pushing you forward to that point?
If I understand the question right, I sort of see myself as being misaligned right from the beginning, in the sense that I didn't feel good enough, and right from the beginning, and all of these ideas were coming to me, and various things I was addicted to, but to be successful, to achieve something outside of me would make me feel okay. I'd finally be all right if I could achieve something or get something. It did push me at the end, because these things just were not allowing me to feel okay, or that I could be who I was really supposed to be.
Yeah.
So and my symptoms and my striving became worse and worse as I got older, to the point where I hit crisis, with kidney failure.
So, was there a point then that came about? I know you mentioned that you had a kidney transplant in the book as well. Was there a point that came about where you thought like it kind of shifted, and you're like, now I feel like I'm more in control in my health than I ever have been, or was it a very sort of gradual process?
It's yes, that was an amazing phase with the transplant. And what had happened there was that I was doing the Course in Miracles. I was watching and learning and reading a lot from Dr. Hawkins. I also went and visited him in the States a couple of times. And also Mooji at that point was based in London, so I was seeing him regularly, doing the self-inquiry practice. I also joined a 12-step program for addiction issues, and I was doing that. And as I was doing all of these things together, I was starting to get more and more this sense of I was starting to feel better and better. And as I was doing this intense spiritual work every day, at a certain point, I was discharged from the asthma clinic and then stopped the gout medication. And also in this 12-step group for addiction, one of the things you do there is you give service. You just try and help others. And I was helping about 7 of these people, and someone else asked me for help in this group. So it's just an opportunity to do service. And I had known that the more I just tried to give freely into the universe, things were improving in my life. I'd always had this, before my kidney failure, I'd always had this thing of like, I'm not good enough, I need to get something from the universe attitude, which is this kind of huge sort of, I'm in lack, and I need to get something before I'm okay attitude. And they were teaching this new spiritual attitude of give from your heart freely without expecting anything in return. Just give what you can, this new attitude. And I was finding the more I shifted into this new attitude of just give freely and give from a place of love and service, I actually noticed, to my surprise, that things were getting better in my life. I was starting to feel happier. I was starting to feel more energy. I was starting to feel like I'm starting to be who I'm meant to be in this world. I started to get... so it was actually like it was making me feel good. And when I had been before kidney failure, when I tried to get things, this attitude, I'm not enough, I need to get something, none of that had worked. And I was finding my health was improving as I was having this new spiritual attitude to life. And I was helping 7 people at the time, and this lady asked me, will you help me as well? I said, yes, I'll help you, because my experience now had showed that the more I was having this attitude of love and service towards the universe, I was getting happier, I was feeling better, my health was improving. And miracles were happening. So I said yes, and so it was my 8th person I was now helping. And then within 2 days of me saying that, I got a phone call in the middle of the night. I was on a transplant waiting list. I was on a machine 8 hours a day for dialysis to keep me alive. And I got a phone call, and it was the hospital. They said, we've got a transplant for you, but we've got 2 people, and so the 2 of you are going to come in, and we're going to choose one to have the transplant. So and it was just after I'd said yes to this girl, and so I of course I said yes, and I asked my mother to give me a lift to the hospital, which she did. And all I can explain, it was the miraculous. I had heard from people that often you get called many times to the hospital before you actually get assigned a kidney, because they check out you and another person, and also that there can be problems with rejection and all kinds of things. And so I thought I was going, and it was my very first call that I got, and sometimes. So I thought, well, you're not going to get it on this occasion, because it's the very first time they've called you. And I went in, and they gave some tests to me and the other man, and then they said they chose me, and then I had the transplant done, and I think it's about 6 or 7 years now. It's still going perfectly. And everything went right. It was like the universe was on my side. It was like I realized, as I had this attitude of being of love and service and giving freely, and almost, if you like, having this attitude of love and there's enough and one can be one's true self and generous with people. It was like the universe was now going to be very loving and generous with me. I could see it. And everything went well, and the operation was successful. And then I got back, and I was very happy to continue with this 8th person that I was now helping. But I knew, and was kind of intuitively told that I knew, because with each, the more I had this attitude, the more good things were happening in my life. So I kind of knew that having this attitude of love and service and sharing one's gifts with the world is actually the best attitude to have in life. And I trusted it because through experience, I was seeing that actually it's actually a reverse attitude to the attitude I had before the age 30, where I'm not good enough and I have to find something or chase something to feel good enough. It was actually the reverse attitude of almost like give generously from your heart and then watch, have faith and then watch what happens. And every time I did, something very, very good would happen. So yes.
Yes, it's an amazing story to hear, and just obviously how amazingly the universe responded to your shift. I mean, just when you talk about giving generously, it's a hugely important part. Is there any other kind of values that new values that you've picked up, or shifts in your your overall mindset that you didn't have prior to the spiritual experience?
Oh, yes. I mean, there have been lots of shifts, and one of the main things, and one of the core shifts that I've had is that it's really important to be in the day, to be in my highest authentic self, or if you like, in a different way, to be at my highest spiritual vibration. So this can be said in different ways. To be really present, to be really connected to one's light, to be really out of negative thoughts, and to be intuitive and receptive. If you like, being aligned as much as possible with the love and harmony and the presence of oneself and in the world, and it's like, and the more I engage in my negativity and my limited thinking, the more I'm getting out of the present moment, the more I'm going off into the future or the past, or the more I may purchase thoughts if I achieve this or do that. So it's like my vibration or my connection to my authentic self starts to drop. The more I allow these lower vibration thoughts, and my level of connection, if you like, to my highest self dropped. So I go to my more lower selves. So it's almost to do, and it's quite clear when I'm vibrating at my highest self, and when I'm starting to let the more negative aspects of myself start to vibrate in the present moment. So it's always to have this thing of being at my highest vibration, and if I'm veering off course, to make adjustments so that I'm going back. Because what I can see from my whole journey, because in active addiction, it was basically feelings of fear, not good enough addiction, and suffering, and there was never any sense of being one's true self. So allowing all of that negativity to be just who I was, led to a very unfulfilled and actually for me ultimately a destructive life, a meaningless life. So, and it's like, as I started to release all of that through all the spiritual work, with the Course in Miracles, with Dr. Hawkins' teachings and Mooji's self-inquiry, and participation with service in 12-step groups, as I did this spiritual work, I noticed that the less I'm allowing these negative thoughts and these negative beliefs to be in the present moment, the more it's like I'm in this, being in sync with the universe, and the universe being in sync with me, and my highest potential and my highest authenticity, or the person I'm supposed to be at my highest level can be there in the day, being directed, if you like, at the highest level for being loving, being of service, being directed with my gifts in the world. So that's one of the key things, shifts that I've made. And there's various tools, like was mentioned with the Course in Miracle lessons, self-inquiry, prayer, also processes. If I feel like a negative feeling is arising, to process those negative feelings so as not to allow those to linger for too long, so that one can be clear. So various things, yes.
Yeah, I can definitely relate with the whole idea of keeping your vibration high. I think that's definitely one of the most important things you can do. It can really change the whole kind of direction that your life can take. So that's very important, and that kind of leads nicely on to what I wanted to talk about next, which was your book, Bulletproof Peace. And the first half is you sharing your story, but the second half is, a huge array of tools that people can use that will, in one way or the other, essentially raise their vibration. So if you could just talk about kind of some of the tools you put in there and your thinking behind that section of your book.
Yes, thank you. Yes, there's 30 different tools, various tools for raising one's vibration and releasing the blocks that are stopping one going to a higher vibration. In the book is described various tools. For example, the self-inquiry tool, which is the one that I learned with Mooji. Now, this is one of the more powerful tools, and it allows one to experience one's true nature. And the more one is dissolving those things which keep one in a lower vibration, the more one is resonating at the highest vibration, if you like. Now, what I learned there was very, very profound. And many people, if they check back, will probably have had very profound experiences in their life, but have not really understood what's happened. But the process, very simply, is asking yourself, what are you right now? What are you experiencing yourself to be right now in an experiential manner? For example, am I experiencing myself as these thoughts that are passing by? Or am I experiencing myself as a physical body with, I don't know, fear in the physical body? So that would be, for example, like a reading. Yes, right now I experience myself as my thoughts in my head, and I experience the location of the body and some fear in my stomach. So that could be but then that would be the thing that one would start the self-inquiry process on. Okay, well, are these thoughts me? Is there actually, let's actually experientially see, is there actually a detached, or is there an observer observing the thoughts? And can you be in the observer position, observing the thoughts? And if you keep practicing this, you'll eventually realize that thoughts are passing by, and one is the observer of these thoughts coming and going. This is a very profound spiritual realization, because beforehand one would immediately see that one is the thinking, but afterwards one would see that one's essence is actually prior to the thinking. Mm-hmm. And so this detachment from the thoughts starts to happen, which is very important, because one's vibration now will start to rise quite rapidly. Because why most people are actually almost experiencing themselves as their thoughts is because of this very strong identification or interest, or the meaning they give to the thoughts, which then it's almost like it sucks them into being the thoughts. And their vibration, and the more they get intertwined with these thoughts in a heavy way, the more the vibration goes down to the darker vibrations of fear, anger, guilt, shame, pride. So these lower, with the greater and greater identification with the thoughts, as you go to the lower vibrations, it's like the thoughts become non-stop. It's like it's an endless stream going at a very rapid rate, and one is lost in thoughts all the time, not present at all. So as you start to learn this process and start to get the recognition, yes, my essence is not thoughts. Thoughts pass by my essence, but they are not that. Then this loosening up and the vibration starts to become higher and higher. And once then starts to get to these places of pure presence, where thoughts can come and go, but one is not the thoughts. The other thing is, of course, negative feelings and negative feelings in the body, like there can be stress or pain or anxiety or a headache or various things that could be happening in the body. Again, let's say, for example, if it was a pain in the foot, is there actually is there an observing of the pain in the foot? Is there actually an observer observing the pain, which is not the pain? So as you keep contemplating this, at a certain point, it'll be revealed that actually there's an observer of the pain, which is not the pain. It's just watching the pain. And as you're the watcher of the pain, the most miraculous thing starts to happen, like the pain starts to diminish. Or if you can be the observer of fear in the stomach, then the fear starts to diminish. So it's almost like there's these habitual fixations or addictions or attachments or sucking in to the thoughts or negative feelings. And as one is almost like letting them go, letting the attachment to these things go, and one goes up into these higher vibrations. It gets even more profound later on. Such things as location, like say the body seems to be located in a certain area. What you asked is there an observer of this area? And then you ask, is that when you're observing the area, is the observer limited by area? And if it is, then there's another observer observing this. So eventually you find that the essence is not limited in any way by distance. Also, the higher vibrations is actually, it was quite fascinating to understand and to experience that. And everyone's experienced these days when time flies by, there's no time, or one seems to be in the timeless. So this absolute timeless presence and joy, everyone's probably had glimpses of that. And actually there's no time in those experiences. So it's like something in the mind is almost like counting time. And it's a very subtle thing, but if one goes to, well, is something here observing time or witnessing time, which is not time? As you contemplate this, suddenly it's like the thing in the mind that tracks time starts to dissolve, and one goes into the timeless limitless now. So it's almost like different layers will be revealed the more you do the practice, and then you're dissolving these things which can take you from feeling very constricted and limited in the moment to having this kind of timeless happy presence. There's also guidance that comes forth. So that's one of the tools which has been very profound for me. One of the tools mentioned in the book. Prayer is also a very powerful tool. Praying for people's happiness if you're angry at them, or praying for forgiveness, for help in forgiving these people. These are also there's also a section on prayer in the book. The Course in Miracles, which I mentioned, there's also a tool there devoted to A Course in Miracles, and the most miraculous experiences that I had while doing that. So it's like as you start doing these spiritual practices, you get affirmations that they're taking you in the right direction.
Right.
the course is very good on what we were talking about before, in not making something outside of yourself the source of your happiness. Because if you make immediately you make something outside of yourself your source of your happiness, you can't really be properly happy.
You lose your power, really.
Exactly. You go into the victimhood. You've lost your power. You've lost your pure, authentic self. The second you purchase a thought that I'm happy if I'm successful, or I'm happy if I'm thin, or I'm happy if this person likes me, then immediately you cut off your authentic self. So it really drums that in, and that you have to, and it also has these things almost like meditation, to experience your true light, your true eternal nature. And then once you awaken to that, then it becomes very, very clear that actually holding these victim thoughts, which are prevalent in this world, actually blocks you off and takes you to a lower vibration. That's right.
Yeah, I mean, it's yes, I've been through the book personally, and yeah, some very, very powerful tools in there, and I definitely recommend it to the listeners to check that out. And I'll be putting a link for that book in the show notes as well. So definitely recommended. So as we just get to the towards the end of this interview, if you could just tell us, what you're working on now and how people can find out about you and your book and things like that.
Oh yes, thank you, Chris. Yes, my work right now, I have the book Bulletproof Peace, 30 Spiritual Secrets of Peace and Happiness. It's available on Amazon out there, and my work involves, I run, for those who are thinking of visiting London, I run a regular spiritual group in central London every Saturday, where people are welcome, and we go through various tools from the book. In that group, I'm also available for coaching, so people can contact me via my website, which is www.sabbirmuslim.co.uk. So I'm available for coaching. Currently working on, it's not yet finalized, but it will be as soon as it is. I also have a newsletter which I publish, and people can register for that to get videos and my newsletter. I also take regular videos. I have a YouTube channel, so that the material that we're talking about, they can go to my YouTube channel, which is on YouTube. If they search for Sabbir Muslim, you'll be able to get my channel. And there's lots of videos which I share for everyone to benefit. I'm currently working on a video course which will go through many of the things we've been discussing today, so that we have that people can also learn everything through that video course, so that all of these tools can be shared with the world, so that people can realize their authentic nature and be relieved of all the things that are burdening them down.
Wonderful. So yeah, really appreciate you coming on the show, Sabbir, and sharing this story. And I think it just proves to people that despite facing huge adversities and potentially massive problems that you may be facing in your life, that if you search for the answers and look for the solutions, and you're persistent, even in the face of frustration and all the negative emotion that comes with it, you can rise up and turn your life around and have almost miraculous results. So really appreciate you coming on the show today and sharing your story, Sabbir.
Thank you so much for having me, Chris. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you again.
So that's it for today, guys. I hope you have enjoyed this episode of Rise of Humanity, and that you will check out Sabbir's book, Bulletproof Peace, which I'll be linking to in the show notes. It comes highly recommended, and I definitely recommend that you implement it in your life. So that's all for today, guys. Take care, and I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.